Greetings, friends, and welcome to Countdown to His Coming, our first episode of 2024 right here in January. Grab a good cup of coffee and join me as we look at the top 10 places where this part of Matthew chapter 24 is being fulfilled all around us. We're looking at the Olivet Discourse today just briefly, and then we're going to talk about these top 10 places and hang on till the end because number 10 might be a brand new revelation for you. But as we look at these places where turmoil and conflict are going on all over the world, things that have been exploding here in just the last few weeks, many of you may be kind of like that old Sandra Bullock movie entitled While You Were Sleeping. Because while we were enjoying Christmas celebrations here in the United States, just enjoying a full schedule of college football games, NFL playoffs, and other things to distract us from what's really going on in the world, stuff has been happening. Now, I want to pick up in Matthew chapter 24 today and just read these verses beginning in verse 6. It is Jesus Christ himself speaking and talking about the end of days. He says, "You are going to hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that you're not alarmed because these things must take place, but the end is not yet. For nation will rise up against nation and kingdom against kingdom. There will be famines and earthquakes in various places, and all these events are the beginning of labor pains." Well, once labor pains begin, is there any real stopping it? No, the labor just intensifies, the pains get closer together, and ultimately the baby's on its way. Well, in verse 9, he talks about some implications of these times by saying, "Then they will hand you over to be persecuted, and they will kill you. You will be hated by all nations because of my name, and then many will fall away, betray one another, and hate one another." Now, do you see this kind of atmosphere occurring in the world today and even in our own nation? Well, I want us to look briefly at the 10 hot spots today that are popping up all around the world that indicate we may just be heading into, or maybe it has already started, a third world war. Now, it's very important for you to recognize that the last time we had a world war was just prior to the atomic age. Matter of fact, it introduced the atomic age right at the end with those two bombs that were dropped on Japan. But we have not experienced a war in which we had unleashed nuclear weapons completely. Now we have a host of nations that not only have nuclear weapons, but some of which seem to be pretty radical and are right now brandishing them and saying, "We're willing to use them. Back us into a corner and see what happens." With this thought, remember, we lost over 50 million people in World War II, but the Bible talks about a time of war that's coming that's going to result in a devastating collapse of humanity and loss of life. In the book of Revelation, it talks about a war that's going to reduce the population of the earth by a third. Now, my prayer is that war doesn't happen in its fullness until after the rapture of the church. Some folks don't even believe that may even happen today. They're saying, "Oh, no, there's not going to be a rapture." Well, if that's the case, then folks, get ready for even more pain and suffering. Because as we look at what might occur if all these weapons are unleashed upon humanity, it's to say it's a scary thought is the understatement of the year. As we begin 2024, do we actually have World War III on the horizon? Just watched a full news program coming out of the nation of India where they are saying it's begun. We feel like this could be the start of World War III. And I'll quote some from them later. But let's get quickly to those 10 hot spots that you need to be watching that nobody's paying attention to unless you find a little snippet here or there in the news. For the most part, we're still too concerned about what our favorite singer, our favorite star, or sports team is doing, and we're not paying attention. So while you were sleeping these last few weeks, here are the wars that are breaking out around the world. Number one, just this week, North Korea has fired on 2 South Korean islands. South Korea is now sending an evacuation order to Yongping Island, and they say they will respond to this aggression by North Korea, a truce that's been broken now, and all of a sudden they're firing on one another. Could that thing explode into something else? Well, we know the little tin-horn dictator of North Korea is not quite mentally stable. Who knows what he's got in mind this year for what's going on the Korean Peninsula. Number 2, another vessel's been hijacked in the Arabian Sea. This time the vessel belonged to India. There's also a Liberian flagged vessel. It seems like every time we turn around, vessels are being attacked and hijacked that belong to nations that have nothing to do with the current Middle Eastern conflict. These pirates, the Somali pirates now are back in the news, as well as the Yemeni Houthis. And all of a sudden there's this common picture. These Islamic terrorists, and that's what these groups are all about, seem to be spreading the flames of this growing war to other nations. Even the nation of Japan has said, we're going to have to intervene militarily if they don't leave our ships alone. Well, in particular, Indian naval vessels have now responded and are heading to the area to just protect their own shipping and try to recover it from these pirates. Could it be that getting India, one of the world's most populous nations, involved in this war is just another step toward what could become a world conflict? Well, the folks in the newsrooms in India are asking this question: is this the start of a new world war? Well, let's go on and look at some of the places it's continuing to explode. The Houthis, of course, another Islamic terror group, have started here over the past week or two using USVs. That means unmanned surface boats. Now, keep in mind, the Houthis seem like a very small and insignificant kind of group. But having been funded and equipped by Iran, that's right, biblical Persia, and the biggest state sponsor of terror in the world, they have grown into quite a significant fighting force. They have been given an ultimatum by the United States and 11 other nations that you will stop this right now or we will respond. We will attack you. Matter of fact, we've already attacked them in several places. But their response? We're on the side of Allah, and He is going to defend us. If we die, we're martyrs in a better place. And so we're not going to stop. They literally, in their response, have issued an open challenge to all who want to stand against them. Seriously? Well, that's exactly what starts a war, and it's going to have to be one that you're going to have to get to the leaders of those groups. You're going to have to get into Yemen. You're going to have to find those terrorists, take care of them, and you got to cut off their monetary and military supply chain that's coming from Iran. Well, how about number 4? The Iran war on Israel continues. Yes, remember, it is Iran that started this war with their proxies, the main proxy, Hamas, coming out of Gaza. And yes, where you might, in the news of the at least American corporate news media, you might get the idea that Israel is not only winning this war, but they are committing all kinds of atrocities against innocent civilians. Well, my friends, you've got a group of people right now who are still adamantly fighting against Israel. All they've got to do is surrender and surrender the hostages tomorrow, and it's over. But instead, they continue to fire rockets into Israel, attack Israel. Israel's continuing to lose soldiers and civilians day by day to these terrorists. They're in no way laying down their arms. Instead, they're getting even more radical in what they're doing. Because rockets have been fired from Gaza and now from Lebanon by Hezbollah over and over all through the Christmas season. There was no peace on earth in the Middle East during this time. And from terror groups within the West Bank, inside the borders of Israel, then you're just continuing to see this conflict escalate. Well, as it escalates, it seems to sweep in folks from other nations. Israel has just had to respond with strikes into Lebanon. You see, in the northern part of Israel, there are some 80,000 people who are refugees in their own country. They've had to move away from the border. They can't go back to their homes because they're all under attack from Hezbollah to the north. What's going on here? Well, friends, it's a continual war that even Israel says could take the rest of this year to complete just what they're doing in Gaza. The war has begun, and it's not going to stop anytime soon. Could it be leading toward some of those biblical conflicts, or is it not a fulfillment of that biblical conflict described in Psalm 83 with those surrounding groups that kind of match up with the Islamic terror groups and nations that are on those sides that are trying to eliminate Israel from the face of the earth? Destroy them as a nation, as it says in Psalm 83. Well, hey, it looks like that may be happening right in front of our eyes. Well, what's going on with Iran, this country that's sponsoring all of this? On the 4th anniversary of Soleimani's death, of course, assassinated when Donald Trump was president, there was a terror attack at the graveside. Dozens of people were killed and injured. ISIS immediately claims responsibility for it. Why would ISIS be fighting against Iran? Remember, ISIS is a Sunni Muslim group, whereas Iran is led by Shia Muslim groups. So yes, this is an infighting within Islam. But what did Iran do in response to that, even though ISIS claimed responsibility for it? They blamed Israel and are saying all the more reason we need to wipe Israel off the face of the earth. Friends, these conflicts aren't going to go away tomorrow. All of this brandishing of the swords is going to continue. All this grandstanding to say we've got to raise up our military even more. We've got to get our armies together because ultimately the prize is Jerusalem, and we will have it before it's over. So friends, here it is, exactly like the prophet Zechariah predicted, the very nations of the world all focused on Jerusalem during this time of conflict that characterizes the end times in the last days. Well, what other wars are going on? I've only gotten through 4. Number 5, have you forgotten that in Ukraine a war is still going on? Yes, Ukraine and Russia are involved in this ongoing conflict. You'd think it's almost over. Russia's pretty much put Ukraine out of its misery, but every time you think that, more money comes in from the West, from America, more supplies come in to keep Ukrainians fighting, or at least what Ukrainians are left. Now you've got conscripts from all kinds of other countries trying to fight because the Ukrainian population has been devastated. Well, as this thing continues, it's sweeping in other nations, and here in the past couple of weeks, here we've had Great Britain donate a couple of older warships to Ukraine to use in the Black Sea. The only problem is when they tried to take them, have renamed them with Ukrainian names, when they tried to sail them from the Mediterranean into the Black Sea, they found the nation of Turkey says, no, you're not. We're going to call on an old treaty that we can use as an excuse for this, and you're not going to bring those ships through this strait and into the Black Sea, and they've been blocked. So now all of a sudden we've got Great Britain, we've got Turkey, we've got others all involved, everybody taking sides with this Ukraine-Russia war. Oh my goodness, what's going on there? Well, just blink and go to another continent. What's going on in Africa? In Africa, the Nigerian genocide of Christians continues, all because of Islamic terror groups. And it's been going on for some time, and nobody in the West wants to pay attention to it. But because nobody wants to pay attention to it, do anything about it, this entire area, the whole region of the Sahel, is now being swept up into this reign of Islamic terror. These groups are involved in Burkina Faso, in Mali, and other Central African nations in a push right now to have an all-out war for control in Africa. It's now involving so many people from so many different nations that it's hard to keep up with what's going on. And you see, in the West, we just kind of put blinders on and say, well, that's happening to Africa. That's nothing to do with us here. But once again, look at the central focus of every single one of those conflicts. The groups that are at the central part of the anger and the terror and the attempts to take over entire countries, they're all Islamic terror groups. Terror attacks have become the new normal, said the Indian spokesperson today, as she was talking about this conflict raging in Africa. Can you imagine being in a position, in a life, and having to have a lifestyle where terror attacks have become the new normal? You say, well, oh boy, aren't we great to be over here in the Western Hemisphere, away from all of that? Well, hang on. Let's go to flashpoint number 7. Venezuela, yes, the nation that was once very prosperous and then destroyed by socialist Marxist dictators, has now threatened to start an oil war with neighboring Guyana over just their rights to have the oil that's around that part of the South American continent. They've made the threat because they think we're much bigger, we've got a big military, and we will fight them off. And guess what? Who else? The United States is throwing their hat in the ring, saying, no, you will leave them alone, and no, you will not start anything down here, and and we will respond. So here we go. Now, nation after nation is trying to get on one side or the other of the Venezuela-Guyana war, possibly. Oh my goodness, when did this pop up? Well, hang on, because if you swing back around to the Asian side of the world, you've got to look at Red China, that's now facing off with two nations, not just free Taiwan, but the Philippines, over control of waterways and what's going to be going on in the South China Sea. China's decided to declare sovereignty over places that have always been international waters, and the tensions continue to rise as they say, we will definitely reunify China. Their idea for reunification is they can't allow this democratic, prosperous society to continue on Taiwan, not under their control. And in the same way in which they've been able to take control over Hong Kong, they look at this as the ultimate prize. It's the ultimate promise that's been made by their dictator for years. And they only have a few more months before perhaps another regime takes control in the United States that might have a stronger administration that might not deal with them as lavishly as our current administration has. So perhaps they're motivated to make some things happen here in 2024. Well, with that turmoil going on, Japan has decided they've got to ramp up their military, and they are doing some fantastic things in the way of development of artificial intelligence and other things to make their military stronger and strong enough to withstand perhaps an onslaught from an enemy like North Korea in that area. My goodness, when did this start happening? Well, it's been going on for a while now, but now it's really ramping up as they're saying they need brand new weapon systems that are ready to go to protect them against their enemies here in the next couple of years. But then we go to the nation of Armenia, one that most folks couldn't find on a map. But yet in Armenia, there has been a systematic persecution of Christians because this is perhaps the oldest Christian nation in the world. And that persecution coming from nearby Islamic nations on both sides, one of which, of course, is Turkey, famous for the Armenian genocide of the early 1900s, is amazingly happening without hardly any response from the West or any other so-called Christian nations. Instead, these people are being persecuted to death, literally, while everyone else is paying attention to the more popular conflicts. Well, now that's 9. I said I was going to touch on 10. What's the one we don't want to hear about today? The rumblings of a potential civil war in the United States of America, plus the war that America might get involved in overseas, is something that a lot of people also are asleep at the switch on right now. Right now in the Middle East, our forces are under constant attack. It seems like we're already in a war. One side at least thinks it's a war. Since the 7th of October, there have been, at last count from my standpoint, some 118 attacks against American military bases in the Middle East. And every time we respond, we tend to make, little small responses to say, no, don't do this, or we might come after you. And look how powerful we are. It doesn't seem to be deterring the enemy. They just keep attacking, looking for the point of weakness where they can make a difference. In the meantime, our shipping is being attacked. It seems like at least one side thinks they're in a war against America, as they're screaming out in some of the streets of Tehran, "Death to Israel and America." Well, while all this is going on, the political sides in the United States are really getting tense over the upcoming election. We've got courts that have tried to take the front runner for the Republican presidential nomination off the ballot to say Donald Trump can't even run. It only makes Donald Trump's supporters all the more adamant as to why they need to support him, and we need to overturn these people that are trying to wreck our constitutional republic. With Attorney General in Maine and the courts in Colorado and others bringing up the subject, here's what we're going to land with, perhaps, in the fall. People are talking openly about it now. A presidential election that may be contentious at best, with constant court cases being thrown at Donald Trump, hoping one of them is going to somehow stick, that he can perhaps be jailed and be a felon before the election happens in November. And it only makes the Trump supporters more angry and upset. All the more reason they say, look, we can't let people treat our country like some banana republic where you jail your political enemies. Yet if you look in American jails today, we've got an awful lot of people that have been jailed for their political views, while on one side we turn criminals out on the streets as repeat offenders to take down the very peace of our larger cities. What's going on in America? And people are suddenly talking about something we never thought would even be on the discussion table, that no one will be satisfied with the results of this election coming up in November, that neither side will be happy, because on one side or the other there will be those to say, yep, see, this election is not legitimate. You wouldn't let our candidate on the ballot, or you cheated to make sure our candidate didn't win. And that on either side of this, there's going to come this whole idea that's being pushed out there that, hey, we can't accept the results of an election in November. And that's coming from both sides. Did you ever think we would even be having this thought in our mind in 2024? Yeah, that's something that's being pushed out there as a scenario that we've been backed into, and there's no getting out of it. What's this election season going to look like? Hopefully it's not going to turn into a civil war, but we've got enemies overseas that see the weakness of America right now during this critical time, that think if there's any time that we can get away with something that America normally wouldn't let us get away with, it's now. It's 2024, while this election season is getting into full swing. Friends, what are we seeing around the world today? I think it's an ideal description of exactly what Jesus said. Again, looking with the eyes of prophecy from Jerusalem out across the rest of the world. Wars and rumors of wars. People now taking sides, hating one another. looking across, sometimes not even across the borders of another country, but across the street in their own country, a new set of protesters that are espousing positions that are so diametrically opposed to one another that there's no way to find a peaceful middle. And now hating one another, betraying one another, doing exactly what Jesus said would be happening in Matthew chapter 24. Well, friends, these are exciting but yet desperate times to be living in. All the more reason that we not only have hope and trust in our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, but we share that hope with others, because a lot of the world's circumstances look pretty hopeless right now. Friends, if you have Jesus, you have not only He who is your source of hope, but we look forward to a blessed hope with His soon return. Hey, God bless you. You have a great day in the Lord. We'll do this again next week as we have another countdown to His coming. God bless you.